As the extradition case in Canada against the Huawei executive rumbles on, it now turns out that her arrest might have been carried out unlawfully. If so, how will that affect her extradition proceedings set to start Wednesday? And in the first of a series of interviews explaining some of the background to the current two sessions taking place in Beijing, we'll be looking at how China's 55 ethnic minorities fit into the overall political process. Welcome to The Point, an opinion show coming to you from Beijing. I'm Li Xin. There have been more twists from Huawei CFO Meng Wanzhou's extradition case after the Canadian Justice Department gave the go-ahead to launch proceedings on her extradition to the U.S. last Friday. Her defense team announced on Sunday they will sue the Canadian government, its border agency and the National Police Force for seriously breaching her constitutional rights. Lawyers for Meng said they had filed a notice of civil claim in the British Columbia Supreme Court, claiming the Canadian authorities had detained, searched and interrogated Meng before telling her she was under arrest back on December the 1st last year. China has reiterated its position, calling Meng's extradition case a severe political incident and political persecution against the Chinese high-tech enterprise. What is she accusing the Canadian government of? What does this case, if proven in court, say about the rule of law in Canada? Joining me in the studio are He Jing, an attorney from the Angier law firm, and Andy Mark, managing director of Red Pagoda Resources. Gentlemen, welcome to The Point. So the claim is 13 pages long, so quite a bit of content in there. Try to explain to us exactly what she is accusing the border agency and the police force of the Canadian government of doing, which violated her constitutional rights.
I think according to the papers, I think Meng and her lawyer really accused the Canadian government of committing this illegal search and seizure. This is, I would say, what we call search and seizure, where whether or not the government really follow their procedures to conduct the search and seizure. And under the general constitutional law, you need to conduct the due process. You know, when you arrest someone, you need to really protect the constitutional rights, like the right to privacy, and that's actually very, very important in either in the law of the U.S. or in the law of the Canada. So this is where I think the lawyers really accused the government actually failed to give the proper procedures when they're conducting the arrest at the border.
Andy, after reading this claim, I'm sure you did, what are some of the details that stood out for you of what she described, what Meng Wanzhou described she was treated unlawfully at the airport?
Well, I think, you know, her lawyers, I mean, understandably are looking for a way to have these charges dropped. I mean, we have to look at first, where did it originate? So it started in the U.S. What I think arguably can be seen as a case and instance of selective enforcement, because no other corporate executive has been held charged like this for this type of allegation. So I think when we start with that, and then how she was treated in Canada as well, that I think this is a difficult situation, and Canada is kind of caught in the middle and twisting on the horns of this dilemma.
Right. Well, this is nothing new to us, that we have been saying that, or the Chinese government has been making it very clear that Canada shouldn't have done this. This is a political case, and yet Canada has decided to proceed. Now let's talk about this case as this per se. One of the things that her lawyer team has mentioned in the claim is that the case concerns a deliberate and premeditated effort on the part of the defendant officers to obtain evidence and information from the plaintiff in a manner which they knew constituted serious violations of the plaintiff's rights. I want to ask Mr. He here, how would you characterize deliberate and premeditated effort? What kind of evidence would substantiate that?
I think what it means is that they did not really say directly that, hey, you are really under arrest, right? I think according to the paper, I think that the custom officer basically went to Ms. Meng and said, hey, we are conducting this custom inspection. and then submit your papers, and then even ask her to give them the password to the computer. But before they're saying that, hey, you are really under arrest, you are really under the sort of the arrest through this the U.S. Department of Justice. So didn't say that. So I think that's why the lawyers are accusing the Canadian government of this deliberate or premeditated kind of behavior.
How is it possible that when the border officer and when the police approached her, singled her out basically on the jetway from everybody else, took her cell phone, took her computer, took all her passports, asked her questions, and refused her right to talk to her travel companion or talk to her lawyer, and did not inform her of a right to silence, to legal counsel? What would be the consideration? How could that be possible?
Well,
can border officers do that?
I don't know exactly about the Canadian law, but normally, I think in lots of countries they give lots of power to the border officers, because keep in mind this is not like Ms. Meng, not the citizen of Canada, and you have lots of international passengers. Normally the custom officials, the border officers, are given probably quite a broad of a discretion to conduct law enforcement activities. But we don't know exactly, what kind of rules, what kind of practices have been enforced in Canadian border, whether this is the routine way they inspect the potential the potential suspects. So I think this is probably up to the trial to find out.
Yeah. According to Ms. Meng, the officers directed her to surrender all her electronic devices and computers, as well as her passports, which Meng provided, believing she had no choice as the CBSA, the Canadian Border Services Agency, officers had intentionally failed to advise her of the true reasons for her detention, her right to counsel, and her right to silence. Do the border officers have the right to do all of that without presenting an arrest warrant? Again, Mr. He.
Well, this is probably exactly the Canadian law, the Canadian legal issues, and I think that every country have their own procedures.
Because they are not stopping her for immigration checks. They're stopping her to be arrested for the charges that the U.S. is pressing. Right?
Exactly.
So I think when they arrest her, they need to tell her or present the arrest warrant and say, hey, you're under arrest for this reason. You have to come with us.
I think the key question is, even if this is improper procedure, okay, even if the custom official did not do what they could have done, okay, let's say in all the fully nice way or polite way, what will be the legal consequences? I mean, in some of the search and seizure law, the biggest rule is what there's a rule called the fruit of a poisonous tree. Okay, that the rule is that hey, if they really violate the due process to a certain way, that all the evidence under that procedure should be forfeited, should not be heard in the trial. So now a big question is, what is this implication, even if this custom official did not follow the rules?
Well, I think there are some significant consequences here, and that is also the word the lawyers are using, because according to the lawyers, the CBSA officers detained Meng Wanzhou for the express purpose of obtaining information which they and the Royal Mounted Police and / all U.S. Department of Justice officers did not believe would be obtained if the plaintiff was immediately arrested, meaning they did not tell her that she was under arrest.
Right.
They asked her questions, they talked to her, and she replied without knowing that she was being interrogated for potentially the crimes that she was accused of committing in the United States. Because if they would have presented the arrest warrant, she would have said nothing. She would have said, I want my lawyer, I want to keep silence. So this is the thing. If the police really want to talk to her and ask her questions about her activities in the United States, what should they have done?
Again, it's probably eventually up to the judge to really look at that what would be different, even if she is fully advised about the procedure. What would be the big difference here? Would she have the right not to give any of the evidence, I think that's probably one of the very big legal questions the court
so
has to consider.
basically you're saying whether due process or not is not very important so long because it doesn't really change very much the outcome.
Well, the key is whether this is really part of the due process. Due process is very has a lot of subtleties.
Okay.
So this is, again, this is probably the big constitutional law issues maybe for this case.
I'm sure there are a lot of legal questions here. We're not the court, so we're not going to talk about that. But and yet, Andy, looking at this, hearing all the legal back and forth, what is your impression of the kind of questions that are being raised, meaning the possibility that due process was not being observed? What's the implication, you think, of this suit of Meng against the Canadian government on her extradition case?
Well, I think, exactly is the point you made, right? I mean, that can this affect the outcome? I mean, my understanding, not being a lawyer, but that it's an extradition case, right? So Canada's detaining her.
No, but I think the point here really is that the Canadian Department of Justice has repeatedly insisted that Canada is a country of rule of law, that the judicial system is impartial, is perfect. The administrative branch doesn't go into the judicial branch. That is the problem. I think that is where it just doesn't add up. If it is a country of rule of law, why would officers not carry out due process? For what reason, Andy?
Well, there certainly could be a political motivation here as well. Political in the sense that Canada is part of the Five Eyes, the so-called Five Eyes that share information, intelligence with the United States. So it could, it certainly sounds like on the face of it that they were also, in addition to detaining her for this extradition to the United States, but also perhaps thinking about maybe we can get some useful information as well. Again, without knowing the details, it certainly sounds plausible and that wouldn't be surprising.
But then
that's why I think that Ms. Meng and her team actually made a very, very good, very powerful move, by filing this a constitutional case. At least force everyone to really looking at the procedure, what exactly have been done, whether it's really right or wrong under the Canadian constitutional law. I do want to say that search and seizure law is really always a very tricky area to the law enforcement, especially to the criminal law enforcement justice system, because it has to be really done in a way that the citizens' rights are fully protected, or even the permanent residents' rights, constitutional rights are fully protected, and also the law enforcement actually are able to get the job done without overly sort of stringent.
Anyway, there are important questions that need to be asked. If they have a arrest warrant, why didn't they produce this in the first place? Because then there will be no questions asked, right? If you're a country of rule of law, if you're a country of judicial independence, then this is what you should. And I think they need to be extra careful in such a case, which they know is going to be bombshell. They're not doing, just catching a thief. Anyway, we're going to leave it there. Time is really limited. Many thanks to He Jing, an attorney from the Angier Law Firm, and Andy Mogg, Managing Director of Red Pagoda Resources. You have been watching The Point with me, Liu Xin. We're going to take a very short break, and when I come back, I'll be playing an interview I recorded earlier to coincide with the first day of the Liang Hui, or 2 sessions of the MPC and the CPPCC that are currently taking place here in Beijing. Today, we'll be finding out how China's ethnic minorities fit into the overall political process. Stay with us.